My dad left me in the forest to make me a man. He didn't know what I'd find out about my brother. My father left me in a national forest 40 miles from the nearest paved road with a bottle of water, a pocket knife, and a compass I didn't know how to use. He shook my hand like I was a business associate, told me this will make you a man enough, got back in the truck and drove away. I was 14 years old. I want to say I'm writing this for advice, but honestly, I think I'm writing this because a detective told me yesterday that I'm not allowed to talk to my father anymore. And I don't know what to do with all the words I still have. I'll back up. My name doesn't matter for this, so I'll just say I'm the younger of two boys. My dad, I'll call him Gary, did 2 tours in the Army before I was born, Ranger qualified. The kind of man who still makes his bed with hospital corners and thinks a firm handshake is a personality trait. My older brother, Wheeze, was built exactly like him. Varsity football, deer hunting since he was 10, the kind of kid who fixed a carburetor before he could drive. I was not that kid. I read. I built little apps on an old laptop I saved up for. I got a coding scholarship offer to a summer program the year all this happened, and I was so excited I couldn't sleep for a week. My dad looked at that acceptance letter like I'd handed him a parking ticket. "Sit down work," he said. "Screen work, that's not going to make you anything." That was the week before the camping trip. Every year, the first weekend of October, my dad took us up north. His words, never more specific than that. To a stretch of national forest land he said his own father used to take him to. We had gone every year since he was 7. This was going to be my first year old enough to go, and my dad made a huge deal about it. New boots, a talk about being a man. My mom got quiet every time it came up, which I didn't think much about at the time because my mom got quiet about a lot of things. The drive up was almost 4 hours. My dad talked the whole way about his own father, a man who died before I was born, and how he'd been left alone in the woods for one night at 16. And how it put something in him that never left. We sat up front nodding along like he'd heard the speech 100 times, which I'd later learn he had. We parked at a trailhead I didn't recognize, hiked in for maybe 90 minutes on a trail that got thinner and thinner, and then stopped at a clearing next to a creek. My dad handed me a water bottle, a knife, and an old military compass. "This is where I leave you," he said, "one night. You find your way to the ranger station 8 miles east by morning. You walk out of these woods a man. That's it. That's the whole test." I laughed because I thought it was a joke. It was not a joke. Weeze wouldn't look at me. My dad shook my hand, an actual handshake, like I was closing a deal, and said the line. "This will make you a man enough." Then they turned around and walked back down the trail, and I stood there in a clearing I didn't recognize, in a forest I'd never been in. As the only sounds around me went from my family's footsteps to nothing at all. I want to be really honest with you about what the next 14 hours were like, because I think that's the part people skip when they tell survival stories. And it's the part that actually matters. I didn't cry right away. I think I was too confused to cry. I sat down on a rock and waited, genuinely thinking someone would come back for me in 20 minutes, that this was some kind of test with a hidden camera. That any second my dad would step out from behind a tree laughing. Nobody came. By the time the sky started going orange, I understood 2 things. 1, I was actually completely alone. 2, I had absolutely no idea how to use a compass. I want to give my past self a little credit here, because the one thing that saved my life that night is the exact thing my father mocked me for a week earlier. I read a lot. And 2 summers before, bored out of my mind, I'd gone on a Wikipedia deep dive into wilderness survival, how to find north without a compass, how to signal for help, why you never drink untreated water, how hypothermia actually kills you, not the cold itself, but your judgment going first. I remembered maybe 60% of it. That 60% is the only reason I'm alive. I found the creek my dad had pointed out and decided to follow it downhill, because I remembered water usually leads to civilization eventually. I built a lean-to out of branches before it got fully dark, the way I'd read about, and packed it with leaves for insulation. I did not sleep. I sat with the knife in my hand and listened to a forest make every sound a 14-year-old's imagination can turn into a bear, a cougar, a person. Around 2 a.m. it started raining. I want to skip through some of this because it's hard to write, but I'll say, By morning I was soaked, shaking in a way I now know was early hypothermia. And I had walked in what I later found out was almost the wrong direction entirely. The ranger station my dad mentioned was real, but I never would have found it. Not in 100 years, not the way he'd set it up. I was found at 11 a.m. The next day, almost 19 hours after they left me, by a woman named Carol, a volunteer with the county's search and rescue team, because my mother had called 911 the night before. I didn't know that part until later. My mom hadn't gone on the trip. When my dad and Weez got home that night without me, smiling, by the way my mom told me, smiling like they'd dropped a kid off at soccer practice, she asked where I was. My dad told her the plan. Like it was normal, like it was a bedtime story about character building. My mother, who I will be honest had gone quiet and small around my father for most of my childhood, did something I will love her for the rest of my life for. She waited until he was in the shower, and she called 911 and reported her son missing in a national forest. She met the search team at the trailhead at 6 a.m. My father did not go with her. My father, according to the deputy who told me this months later, stayed home because he didn't think it was necessary and was confident I'd walk out on my own. Here's the part of this story that turned it from a bad camping trip into a police investigation. When Carol found me, I was hypothermic, dehydrated, and I found out at the hospital had a hairline fracture in my ankle from a fall in the dark I don't even remember taking. While I was in the ER, a detective came to talk to my mother because a minor being intentionally abandoned in a wilderness area is, it turns out, a crime. Not a parenting choice, a crime. Reckless endangerment of a child at minimum in our state. My mom told the detective everything, the trip, the test, my father's own account of what his father did to him. And then she said something that made the detective stop writing and look up. She said, "This isn't the first time. Weez went through it too, but there was another one before Weez." My husband had a son from his first marriage. Danny, he would be 26 now. I had never heard the name Danny in my life. Here's what came out over the next 6 weeks, pieced together from my mom, from Weez, who broke down completely once the police started asking him questions, and eventually from the case file itself, which my mother was allowed to see parts of as the investigation moved forward. My father had a son from a brief first marriage in his early 20s, Danny. When Danny was 16, my father took him on the exact same trip, to the exact same stretch of forest, and left him the exact same way. Danny never made it to the ranger station. He was found 4 days later by actual search and rescue, not a family member's phone call, because Danny's mother didn't even know where he'd been taken. And it took her almost 2 full days to convince anyone something was wrong, because my father told her Danny was camping with friends. Danny survived, technically. He came out of those woods with rhabdomyolysis, severe dehydration, and according to my mother, who'd only heard this secondhand over the years in vague, warning-shaped fragments, he was never the same afterward. My father and Danny's mother divorced within the year. My father did not maintain a relationship with Danny. My mother said she'd always been told Danny went a little strange after that, and that his mother overreacted about the whole thing. Danny didn't go strange. Danny had, from what the detective's report and Danny's mother's statement both eventually confirmed, developed severe PTSD as a teenager and had spent years in and out of treatment as an adult. He was, as far as anyone could tell, doing okay now, 31 years old, living 2 states away, estranged from my father completely. When investigators reached out to Danny as part of building the case against my dad, he agreed to give a statement. He'd spent 15 years believing what happened to him was an isolated, private family failure, something he was supposed to have just been tougher about. Finding out my father had done it again, to Weez, and now to me, was, according to the victim impact statement he later gave in court, confirmation that the man who raised me for 16 years thought almost losing his son in the woods was a parenting strategy, not a mistake. My father was arrested 6 weeks after I was found. He was charged with felony child endangerment. Because of Danny's statement and the pattern it established, 2 documented incidents, one resulting in hospitalization and permanent psychological injury, a second resulting in a search and rescue operation and a physical injury to me, prosecutors were able to pursue it as something more serious than a single reckless act. They argued, successfully, that this was a demonstrated pattern of dangerous conduct toward multiple children, which affected both the charges and the sentencing. My mother was investigated, too, initially, for failing to intervene during Wee's turn at 14. But her 911 call the night I was left, and her full cooperation with investigators from day one were both taken into account. She was not charged. The detective told her off the record that her call likely kept this from becoming a second hospitalization or worse, and that it mattered. My father took a plea deal rather than go to trial. He pleaded guilty to felony child endangerment and received 18 months, with the possibility of parole after 12, plus a permanent order that any future unsupervised contact with minors, including any future grandchildren, would need court approval. We's had to give a statement, too, describing his own night in the woods at 14. He told the detective he'd always thought he was supposed to be grateful for it. That it worked on him, in his words, made him tougher, and he genuinely believed that until the week I went missing, when he watched our mother's face while she waited by the phone, and understood for the first time that what happened to him wasn't a gift. It was neglect with a nicer name. My mom filed for divorce 3 weeks after the arrest. We moved in with my aunt, her sister, about 40 minutes from our old house. I switched schools mid-semester, which I was dreading, but it turned out to be one of the better things that happened that year. Nobody at the new school knew the story. And for a while, I just got to be a kid who liked computers again instead of the boy from the news. Because it was the news for about 4 days. Local station picked it up first. Father charged after leaving teen son alone in National Forest as rite of passage. Then a regional outlet ran a longer piece once Danny's statement became public. Record, connecting it to the earlier incident. I didn't watch any of it. My mom did once alone and told me afterward she was glad I hadn't. Weez and I are okay. Better than okay, actually. He apologized to me, really apologized. Not the kind where someone's just trying to make the guilt go away. About 3 months after everything happened. He said watching Danny's statement get read into the record was the first time in his life he understood that toughness was a story our father told to make what he did to us sound like love. I never met Danny in person, but he wrote me a letter through my mom after the sentencing. I'm not going to share all of it because it's his, but the last line has stuck with me every day since. You didn't need the forest to prove anything. I hope somebody tells you that a normal amount of times, because nobody told me even once. I did the coding summer program the following June. My dad, back when he saw that acceptance letter, called it sit-down work that wasn't going to make me anything. 4 months after my father was sentenced, I finished the summer program with the top project in my cohort, a basic app that honestly doesn't matter what it does. Except that building, it was the first time in almost a year I felt like myself again, instead of the kid from the forest. My mom is doing better than I've seen her in years. She started therapy, which she'd never done before, and she and Weez and I have a Sunday dinner now that's just normal, boring even. I didn't know how much I wanted boring until I had a year without it. I still don't know exactly what man enough was supposed to mean. But I know it wasn't a compass I couldn't read, or a night in the rain, or 19 hours of being someone's unfinished lesson about his own father. I think it's just this, waking up on a Sunday, making pancakes badly with my brother, and nobody testing me for anything at all. Update 4 months later. My father's first parole hearing is in 3 weeks. My mother, Weez, and I have all submitted statements requesting it be denied. Danny is submitting one too. We've never spoken directly, but my mom has been quietly keeping him updated on how I'm doing, and last week he sent one more message, just 5 words. Proud of you. Keep building things. I intend to.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating Reddit tales, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Archives of Reddit. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.